So on this video, we'll be looking at Act 1, Scene 5 of My Children, My Africa. Okay, so in Act 1, Scene 5, Tammy and Isabel practice for their quiz, right? For the literature quiz, okay? So Isabel comes back from her hockey game which her team has lost. She and Mr. M confide in each other that they are bad losers. But Mr. M, in this scene, we find out that Mr. M is worried about Tammy. He is suspecting that Tammy is going to get himself into trouble. Mr. M is worried that Tammy might be getting involved in a political activity. He tries to find out if Isabel knows anything about this, but Isabel denies and says that if she was to tell Mr. M with anything that has to do with Tammy, she would be ruining their friendship with Tammy. Okay. Isabel remarks that she and Tammy have become the best of friends in the past few weeks. Okay. Isabel also hints that Mr. M should change his approach to Tammy if he wants to find out what is going on in his life. Stop teaching him all the time, Mr. M. Try just to talk to him for a change, like a friend, she advises. Yes. Isabel advises Mr. M that if he wants to know what is going on in Tammy's life, he should stop teaching him for a moment, but try to listen to him. Try to find out as to what is going on in Tammy's life. Okay? The two learners then start preparing for their literature quiz by testing each other's knowledge on poets. Yes, they were looking at the 19th century poetry. Okay? They also read poems by other English poets of the Romantic movement, such as Byron, Keats, and Shelley. Okay. Their reading of Shelley's poem Ozymandias lead to a tense conversation. So they were reading the poems and then they got to Ozymandias, which led to a tense conversation between Tammy and Mr. M. So Ozymandias was a famous Egyptian king. Shelley's poem, it implies that nothing remains of the statue of the great king or of his power, his snare of cold command. Tammy makes the statement that South Africa has several Ozymandiases waiting to be toppled, waiting to be brought down. Okay? Mr. M interrupts this literature and Mr. M interrupts this literature and labels the act of pulling down statues as vandalism and lawlessness. Tammy withdraws and does not argue any further with Mr. M. Isabel and Mr. M, okay, before we get to that, after Mr. M asserted that the pulling down of statues is lawlessness and it is vandalism, Tammy decided not to say anything to Mr. M anymore. Remember, Tammy once said that Mr. M is out of touch with their realities. Mr. M is out of touch with what is basically happening to the black people. Okay? Isabel invites Mr. M and Tammy to her home for tea. She wants to introduce her new friends to her parents. Tammy reacts defensively when he asks, are they starting to be nervous, implying that her parents are concerned about her friendship with the black boy. Okay? Suddenly, the relaxed and easy relationship between them, which is described in the stage directions earlier in this scene, becomes strained after a few moments of hostile silence between them. Okay? Tammy tells Isabel that Mr. M is out of touch with what is really happening to black people and the way they feel about things. He says that the people have no patience left and they want immediate change. That's what Tammy says. People have no patience and they want change. Okay? He calls Mr. M's ideas Tammy calls Mr. M's ideas as old-fashioned and remarks that old-fashioned ideas like Mr. M's have achieved nothing. According to Tammy, Mr. M is blind. He does not see what is happening in front of him, and he's not aware of what people are saying. Okay? Alright. He calls it the sort of talk that expects us to do nothing and wait quietly for white South Africa to wake up. Isabel challenges him and asks if their friendship is an old-fashioned idea as well. Remember, Mr. M's aim by getting Tammy and Isabel to work together was to try to show that black people and white people can work together effectively, hoping that that will try to put an end to apartheid. So now, since Tammy said that Mr. M's ideas are old-fashioned, people don't want to listen to him talk anymore. They want to see change. Then Isabel asks if there I'm so sorry about the noise. Isabel then asks if their friendship as well is old-fashioned. Okay? Isabel senses that Tammy no longer wants to take part in the literature quiz. She urges him to talk to Mr. M, but he is not prepared to do so because, according to Tammy, you can't just tell your teacher that he has wrong ideas, right? The conversation becomes confrontational, and Tammy sharply tells Isabel to keep her advice to herself. And Isabel is deeply hurt by this, yes. Because Isabel was trying to encourage Tammy to speak to Mr. M and tell him how he actually feels. But Tammy gets angry and says to Isabel, "Don't tell me what I need and stop telling me what to do." Okay? So this is what is happening in Act 1, Scene 5. Tammy and Isabel prepare for the literature quiz, right, with Mr. M. And along the way, Tammy speaks of Ozymandias. That has to do with statues being brought down and stuff. And then because Mr. M is old and is wise, he can tell that there's something that Tammy wants to do. And then Mr. M asserts or says that vandalism as well as lawlessness is not the way to do things, okay? And then Tammy keeps quiet and then tells Isabel that Mr. M is out of touch with what is happening to us black people. Mr. M is still fixated or is still focusing on his old-fashioned way of doing things. And people want change, right? So that's what we find from Act 1, Scene 5. Now let us look at the comments. In this scene, which starts off on a positive note, the dramatic tension increases rapidly. The scene contains two confrontations, one between Tammy and Mr. M, and one between Tammy and Isabel. These conflicts coupled together with the quiz format that is used in the scene. Okay, let us look at the conflict between Mr. M and Tammy. Mr. M sees the acts of violence as vandalism and lawlessness, right? Mr. M believes in constructive alternative to resolution. And then Tammy, on the other hand, thinks that Mr. M is out of touch with the feelings of black people. They have no patience left. Tammy believes that Mr. M's old-fashioned ideas will not bring freedom. Mr. M's old-fashioned ideas of constructive alternatives to revolution, okay? So now that's the conflict between Mr. M and Tammy. Mr. M is against vandalism is against violence, vandalism, as well as lawlessness. Okay. On the other hand, Tammy is in favor of those things because he believes that his people want change, right? And Tammy also believes that Mr. M is old-fashioned since he does not want violence in order to fight for change. Okay. Now let's look at the conflict between Isabel and Tammy. Isabel believes that Tammy should communicate with Mr. M. Isabel also believes that they all need each other and believes that they are a team. Okay? Tammy, on the other hand, does not want to confront a teacher because it is not the done thing. Mr. M identifies with the apartheid system. That's what Tammy says. He says Mr. M identifies with the apartheid system. And Tammy also tells Isabel not to interfere. So now that's the conflicts between Tammy and Isabel. Isabel believes that Tammy should communicate with Mr. M and tell him how he feels. But now that causes conflicts because Utami does not believe in doing that, because he knows that you can't just stand up to an adult and tell them that their ideas are wrong. Like, it's kind of not acceptable in the African ways, right? So that also causes what? Conflicts between the two. Yes. So yeah, that's what we find from Act 1, Scene 5. Act 1, Scene 5 is a bit long. I hope this will be helpful as well. On the next video, I will record the last scene, which is Scene 6, and then I provide practice questions since you guys said you are writing on Tuesday. All right, that's it for now then.